Good evening. My name is Corliss Davis. I'm a member of the Climate Action Team at the UU Church here in Belfast, and we are very pleased to be one of the co-sponsors of this program tonight, along with the Waldo County Climate Action Coalition and, of course, our wonderful Belfast Free Library. So I have at least one quick announcement before I introduce our speaker, and that is to remind you that 2 weeks from tonight is the next program in the climate series that the library is sponsoring this fall. And it's going to be updates from the Maine Climate Council about Maine Won't Wait. And they are required to do an update this year, pardon me. And the speaker is going to be Professor Ivan Fernandez, who is a distinguished professor at the University of Maine's Climate Change Institute. Also, a little tiny announcement. We just learned today, I think, that the one-year trial of community composting at the Belfast transfer station is expected to start on November 1st. So for those of you who live in Belfast, at least, it's limited to Belfast residents. You will be seeing some information in the city's November email newsletter. And a group of us is meeting, in fact, tomorrow morning to get started on other publicity. So you do need to be a user of the transfer station, and you don't need to be a subscriber to Scrap Dogs Compost. But the details will be coming out, and we're all very excited about that option for diverting some food waste from our waste stream to a more useful, productive purpose, we believe. So our speaker tonight is Susanne Lee. She joined the Senator George Mitchell Center for Sustainability Solutions at the University of Maine in the fall of 2021, where she now leads a team working directly with state, business, and community stakeholders, as well as national and global food waste experts, to develop solutions to end food waste in Maine. So, Susanne.
So thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. But I would like it to be a very sort of informal, conversation. It makes me less nervous, and and plus I think it just makes it a lot more fun. And so I appreciate that you came out this evening. So, I have slides and I'll go through my presentation, but feel free to raise your hand, and if you have some questions or something doesn't make sense, I'm happy to stop and address those. Yep. Okay. And I'll hold them. So it's not too close, seems to. Okay. So yes, I'm a faculty fellow at the Mitchell Center, and it's terrific that you're going to have Ivan Fernandez here because he's actually an advisor to our team. He's a soil scientist. And so we at the Mitchell Center, I don't know, raise your hand. Is anybody familiar already with the Mitchell Center and how we? Oh, okay. So because we do a lot of work throughout the state, our role is we're just a research center, so we don't teach classes. I did previously teach at the business school because my background is corporate, and then I taught at the business school. But the most interesting part for the students and me of the business world was really becoming sustainable business practices, sustainable marketing, which led me then to go work for the Mitchell Center full-time. And now I work with students as interns on these teams doing work, creating models for solutions to end food waste. So that's what we do. And I guess, I've been asked here tonight specifically to talk about the connection between wasted food. So the vernacular is food waste, but really the problem with that term is that it implies that food is sort of trash at some point. It's waste. And so, the term, what we like to talk about is wasted food and food loss, which is really what it is, because even in the waste stream, the majority of that food that is in the municipal solid waste stream is good and edible food, unfortunately. So anyway, so you'll hear me talk about wasted food and food loss. That's what you might commonly refer to as food waste. Anyway, so the link to climate change is an important one. And well, just to say, we also talk about our work at the Mitchell Center is particularly Food Rescue MAINE. So that is the program that we created specifically just to focus on this issue of wasted food and food loss. So the pilots, the work, when we work with communities, we talk about our Food Rescue MAINE program, and that is this collection of faculty and students working together. So we kind of go by both of these names. So tonight, I mean, the plan is sort of to take you through the whole thing. Some of this, it seems like I have a very educated audience on the matter. So some of this might be repeating, but, what is the issue of food waste? What's the issue of, related to climate? And then what's the work that we're doing? But the wasted food problem is this problem that about a third of the food that we produce in the United States is actually waste. It never gets eaten. And, that's a number that globally is very similar. So we say, like, if you went to the grocery store and you bought 3 bags of groceries and then you dropped one of them on the way to the car, you would probably be concerned. But somehow in the United States and here in Maine follows the same numbers. We do that, every year, and we don't worry about all that wasted food. So it's 133 billion pounds of food that's wasted and about $160 billion. So there's, it's all the things people generally worry about. It's money, it's food, it's what causes higher food costs, because, this wasted food, you might not be as concerned, oh, I paid for it and now I wasted that food. Okay, that's up to me. But also that amount of wasted food equates to fresh water. So about 27% of the fresh water supply in the United States is used to produce food that people never eat. It wastes energy, it wastes labor, which we're always short on, it wastes soil, it causes habitat loss and destruction because the feeling is we need to have more open land to grow more food, when really, if we didn't waste so much, we wouldn't use up all these resources. So disposing of food waste. So we talk about it as a triple sort of cost, right? It's the cost of the food that you buy in the store that you've wasted, but then it's the cost of those resources. So the energy and labor that goes into it, that's the waste. And then the third part is when you waste this food, somebody has to come and take it away, you or somebody. So there's a cost to disposal. The food is it's the largest single component of our municipal solid waste stream. So it's, if you went through your trash, like, the big landfills, you would find food more often than anything else in the waste stream. And it's also the wettest and heaviest part. So it's sort of by weight, which is how we pay for disposal. It also is what makes, disposal costs so much. And 97% of wasted food generally ends up in landfills where it produces methane gas, a greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than CO2. So, really expediting sort of this global warming and, climate change. So it's bad all around. So I always say this is an issue that touches everybody. If you're economically concerned, it's a tremendous waste of money. If you're concerned about society and health and nutrition, it's a lot of wasted food that's not going to feed the segment of our population that, suffers from hunger and food insecurity. And then if you're worried about this fast changing climate, we're really expediting it with this food waste problem. So anyway, so that's kind of the basic issue of wasted food. And then here in Maine, just so we can sort of figure out, does this really mean us? And the answer is yes, it does really mean us. We follow right along. We throw away about 40%. According to, we just completed the Maine Food Waste Generation Study this in April of 2024. It's 361,000 tons of food that we waste every year. And like I said, the majority of that is actually good and edible food. So it's not the scraps, it's really food that could have been eaten. Like I said, largest part of our solid waste stream. At the same time, as I said, Maine leads New England, or sometimes we're in second place, but anyway, it's not a great distinction in terms of levels of food insecurity. So, 1 in 10 adults and 1 in 7 children, go hungry, and yet we're wasting food. So, sort of the things that I talked about all apply here. And, you might ask it like the disparity, because the United States is a much more developed country, has more resources. The bad news is we waste more food. So you would not find this in some of the third world countries. They take better care of their food because they really realize the importance of it. So, but it averages out to that. In terms of just some other metrics to think about, the average US family throws out, $1,800, probably now over $2,000 a year of food with the rising food prices. And, it's so ironic. You would think that with all the complaints about food supply shortages and high cost of food, that we might see some downturn in the amount of wasted food. And that is not true. Not at all. People are still continuing to throw out food. It's just become a really unconscious sort of habit for most people. The majority of food waste also occurs at home. People like to think, oh, it's those businesses, it's those grocery stores, it's those restaurants. I've seen all the food waste, it's like throwaway. Well, actually, the majority of the wasted food actually occurs in residences. So, restaurants honestly can't afford to waste food at that level, or they'll go out of business. So, in the households, somehow it happens. I don't know if you've heard about Best By labeling, but all those little dates that are printed on almost every food product you buy are also a tremendous part of the problem, because consumers have become, and probably this is why residential food waste is so bad, because people have become accustomed to cleaning out their pantries and their refrigerators simply based on the date. They don't read whether it says Best By or Sell By, which would be a grocery store, indicator for inventory management. It has nothing to do with the safety or health aspects of the food. It's actually only baby formula is the only food category required to have date labeling that means something. The rest of it is sort of a guesstimation, in some cases really a marketing thing. Like if we tell people, if we say how long it's really good, then they won't go and buy anymore. But we could say that the potato chips taste the most crunchy until this date, and maybe the next day they're like less crunchy. I mean, that is not a scientific thing. That's just somebody. And since I used to work at Hannaford doing private brand products, I can tell you that that is how, and it's just the convention. Nobody's particularly at fault. It's just become the way that food products are made, that you need to have a date, because actually it came from the consumers. Originally, it was inventory coding, but consumers showed so much interest in the inventory coding that then manufacturers said, well, maybe we should make it for consumers so they can also participate in this management of food. Anyway, it's a terrible problem, and $1.8 billion. And, we're so fortunate to have Congresswoman Pingree, in our state delegation, because she's leading bipartisan legislation to try to fix this food, misleading labeling. But for right now, it still stands. Although California just passed a law to get rid of all the date labels on their food. And so because it's such a large state, we are keeping our fingers crossed that that will actually have national impact, because manufacturers won't make food just for California. So if it's going to go, maybe it will go for everybody. And I'll tell you also that in the UK, where they've been the most successful at stopping consumer food waste, it's because one of their biggest campaigns was about the state labeling. And I think it was called something like Sniff, Smell, Taste or something. And they reminded people that it's your own senses that will tell you whether something's good or not. If it smells bad, tastes bad, looks bad, it probably is bad. But otherwise, you're probably fine. So they have done a great job reducing food waste, making consumers aware of that. Fruit and vegetables, when we talk about the social impact and food as medicine, unfortunately, one of the biggest sector of food that gets wasted is actually fruits and vegetables, because they do have sort of a perishable quality, and people seem to have a hard time managing that in their refrigerator. So, it's a lot of the fruits and vegetables that get wasted, and the surplus food from retail and consumers sufficient to feed a far greater number than estimated by the USDA to be food insecure. Stated another way, the Earth actually produces 2.5 times more food than we would need to feed everyone on the planet. And yet we know that we have hundreds of millions of people who also suffer from hunger. So it's, it's at that global level, and it's in the United States also, and it's here in Maine, if we could use our food resources better. So that's, the wasted food problem. And, I promise I'll get to the climate point, but we'll just quickly take you through the economic problem. So this 361,000 tons of food waste worth about $1.8 billion at retail, or if you value it as waste, still a lot of money. And that's here in Maine. The higher food prices make food waste a costlier problem. So it should help people to stop, because it's, each item that you waste should be more painful to you. We haven't seen that yet. And each shopping trip, the thing that people seem to forget is I won't have to go to the grocery store as often if I manage my food resources better. But if I'm throwing away a third of what I bought, then I'm going to have to go to the grocery store sooner. But again, we can tell people that, but it doesn't necessarily seem to stick. Higher labor costs, are also adding to the food waste cost problem. Increasing disposal costs, so the cost for landfilling keep going up. The cost of labor to take away your garbage is increasing. So that should all kind of get this to slow down. But, and more food waste increases food system costs. So it's really an economic problem. Like I said, it's a societal problem. This food is wasted. The statistics always change. So anyway, I'm sorry, here it's 1 in 8 adults. But anyway, it's a problem. And we actually have an initiative in our state to end hunger by 2030. So really, we are trying to focus on this and really should do a better job managing our food. We have a food as medicine is sort of a proven thing, which is not really that shocking because people, if they don't eat enough food, they are going to not do as well health-wise. And so, food is medicine in the most basic way possible. And then, like I said, majority of food waste happens in developed countries while poorer countries lack food. So it's a food justice issue as well. So societally, it's a problem. And then getting to, of course, the climate problem. Project Drawdown for many years, since we started this work, so at least 4 or 5 years, has been talking about food waste as perhaps the number one, or at least in the top 3 actions that should be taken to, mitigate climate impact. And so, and it's the most important thing that individuals can do because, right, not everybody can go out and buy a new electric vehicle. Not everybody can even afford to go out and get heat pumps for their home, but everybody is buying food and having food in their household. So this is something where everybody can take action. So that's why it's always been looked at as a really important thing to consider. And over 90% of the food waste, that if it's going to landfills is producing this methane gas. Food waste, if looked at as a country, they talk about it, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases after the US and China. So food waste is really producing a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases. The climate impact of US food waste equal to driving 50 million cars for a year, greater than the airline industry. So again, the impact of food waste. And this has been the data on this has been, kind of getting updated almost annually. So when the state did its climate action plan, we did lobby then for food waste to be included as an action area, but it didn't seem as important in terms of the numbers at the time as, electric vehicles or heat pumps. And so the focus was really on, fuel, alternatives and things like that. But this go around, like it was mentioned, we're updating the climate plan. It's mandatory this year. And so we have put forth recommendations again. And the data suggests that if you look not just at that food that goes into the landfill, but if you look at the CO2 or the carbon footprint of the food system. So all that transportation, all the, everything that it takes to make food that then gets wasted, and you add up all of that. So now that's what's made the impact a lot more substantial. So let's see, food waste also threatens air and water quality. We just had an expert from the DEP that focuses specifically on water quality issues. And he was saying around where you have the landfill, he said that they have measured the PFAS levels, as so high because of the leachate that's coming out of the landfill and going into the surrounding areas. So, it's really a problem. And it's particularly the landfills, were never designed to hold food. That's really the ironic thing is landfills, nobody ever thought that people would put food in the trash. And so the landfills were really constructed to hold dry trash. They weren't constructed to hold food. And so food in there that's why it doesn't get enough air and it starts to produce these gases that are so harmful. And this leachate that's also not a good thing. And, just to let you know, all the methods of getting rid of food. So whether you're putting it in the landfill or whether you're burning it, incinerating it, okay, they're all at the very bottom. This is not, and garbage disposals, I learned just recently, because we never really talked much about it since there's not that much usage. But we now have found that there are businesses that use these big disposal systems. That's becoming less and less popular because they've finally figured out that they don't track the cost of that with the food cost. They track it separately as an operational cost of like having to clean those lines or having to replace the plumbing, or it gets at the water treatment plants where it's a huge problem because of all that organic matter coming into the wastewater treatment. So that is a cost there. So for so long, the cost and the problem of food going down the drain wasn't linked to, these other costs. But anyway, so the EPA in its most recent hierarchy of food waste reduction has, like I said, landfilling, down the drain, and incineration equally, harmful. So this I stole from actually the GoPIF from their presentation for the Climate Council. How big of a deal is food waste and loss? So this is just hot off the presses in terms of, U.S. food loss and waste, 140 million acres of agricultural land, 5.9 trillion gallons of blue water, so fresh water, 778 million pounds of pesticides, 14 million pounds of fertilizer, 664 kilowatts of energy, and releases 170 million megatons of CO2 greenhouse gases. So that is the latest from the EPA in terms of the impact, and that, the huge economic cost I talked about, but the climate impact of food waste equivalent to driving, that was that 50 million gas-powered vehicles for a year. Food waste global carbon footprint was 9.3 billion tons of CO2 emissions, roughly the same as generated by the US and EU combined. So that's where we talk about if we're a country, it would be the third largest. So definitely it has a terrible impact on climate change. And again, it's something that we can all immediately today begin to take action on. And, as individual households, as a state, as a country. So this is just some visuals to show you that, food waste isn't just the waste of food. And so why take action now? So if I didn't, if I missed something in trying to impress upon you why we should take action now, it is really important. We have food waste and we have climate change. Both of these are challenges that impact everyone, so it's important to take action now. We have a state goal to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. So, it's not very long, and we're definitely not going in the right direction, so it's important to take that action, and that simple solutions are available now. Again, we don't have to buy anything new. We don't have to get any new technology. This is just really changing our practices, and that you can actually make this difference. So in terms of, our work at the Mitchell Center, what are we doing and what have we figured out is important to do about food waste? So all of our solutions have an economic benefit, have a social benefit, and have a climate benefit. So was one of the criteria about our solutions. And we have also figured out, I've been recently doing some interfaith talks about food waste, that there's really a moral goal here also. And, because of I be doing that talk, I had to research like the Quran, the Bible, like everyone is united in the fact that we need to take care of each other, right? So surplus food is actually meant to be eaten by others, shared with others, not thrown into the trash. And then taking care of the earth, and earth stewardship is also sort of part of everyone's faith, foundation. So anyway, so if it weren't important enough, for cost, economics and social and environmental, you can look at that fourth goal. We collaborate. So in our solutions, these are, key leaders sort of in the state who have an interest in ending food waste as well. And so we do our work with these stakeholders. I talked about the hierarchy. This is in Maine. We've kind of simplified it. Basically, so this is important because a lot of people say, oh, I compost, so I'm really doing my part to end food waste. Well, you could see that composting is, sort of in the fourth tier. So it's better than than disposal, but really the very best thing you could do is work on reduction, work on reducing the surplus in your household. Watch your trash for a week and see what you throw out of food the most frequently. If it's bread, maybe don't buy so much bread, or maybe put the bread in the freezer before it goes bad. So don't have the waste in the first place. Don't buy so much. If it's buy two, get one free, don't do it if you're not going to use it all. So, because then you don't waste the land and the energy and all the rest of the resources to make that food. If you have bought too much, if you make too much, if there's too much food around, the very best thing to do is to feed people. So to donate it, to share it with your neighbor, to have a dinner party and invite people over to eat whatever it is, but to share it and give it to other people, not to waste it. If it's not good enough to feed people, your surplus, then feed animals. If it's not good enough to feed the animals, then we feed the soil, because at every level, food still has the nutrients and the energy that's really important for us. So you can feed that to the soil, and then just don't do the last. Don't dispose of it. Our work again, so what we have identified with our partners is that these are the 6 areas that we work on, which you could sort of think about in your household. So the first one is tracking and measuring food usage. So when you want to reduce, the first thing to do is kind of keep track of what you're doing in your household, and trying to. So we do that with businesses. We're working with a hospital right now on tracking their food waste. We worked with the Department of Corrections during the pandemic when there were no other food service providers open. The prison system was still operating, and so we did a food waste tracking measuring study with them, and we really helped them to reduce the amount of waste and to end up feeding more nutritiously at the same time that they were reducing costs. So that's our solution 1. Solution 2 is to get food to where it's needed. So we do a lot of charitable food system programs, trying to help communities do more food rescue, like point to point. So this business has a surplus of food, or a school, or a catering company, and where is there a congregate living facility in that community that might need that fresh food? So we try to help communities set up food rescue. There's certain apps that are really helpful. So that is solution 2. Solution 3 probably should be solution 1, honestly, which is education. You being here tonight, you participating in this and learning about the food waste issue and what you can do, and then hopefully sharing it with your friends and neighbors. Because, we could put compost buckets on every street corner, but if nobody understands why they should bother to not just put it in the trash and put it in that bucket, it won't get used. So, we have learned that you can make tools available, but if people don't understand why it's important to use them, they won't. So education really is perhaps the most important. Solution 4, there's a lot of interesting economic opportunities that wasted food or food loss presents. So you might have a byproduct. I love to use the seafood industry because, they really don't have any waste, because they have figured out how to monetize. There's a seafood company we have here in the state. They sell fish fillets, but they figured out that all the stuff left on the bones could be taken off and sold for pet food. And then they realized that if they actually got a piece of equipment that refined it further, it could be human edible. So you could make fish cakes out of it, or, things like that. And then they also found out that you could take the skin and you could freeze it, and they ship it to Norway for use in the beauty industry. So at an even higher value, because it's collagen. So, this is the kind of thing that if we don't look at it as waste and we look at it as something useful, a resource, kind of like it used to be done in the olden days, right? Animals, you use every part of it. You don't ever throw parts away. So it's solution 4 is trying to put that thinking back. Solution 5 is to try to get businesses to donate more. There's a lot of fear of liability. Oh, if I donate this food and somebody gets sick, they'll sue me. But that's really not true. There's a Good Samaritan law that really, takes the liability off as long as you give it to an authorized, like a food bank or a food pantry. there's no liability but it's, we have to educate people. And then solution 6 is actually what you guys are doing here. We work with communities in Maine to start up like your transfer station composting program. So, we'd like to see everybody in every community in Maine have a resource for doing the right thing with their food scraps. So we've done some of those pilots. So this is, as I was talking about, these are just some of the examples of the work we've done. So the first, working with, this was the Department of Corrections. I mean, just very interesting things like they have a nutritional plan. I mean, and again, I tell you these stories because it's in your own household, but they used to think every day, Monday through Sunday, we have to feed, and there's a certain nutritional mandate that they have for each resident. This is what they need to provide. So they have a nutritionist plan a menu. Nobody ever planned about the leftovers. So they never thought like, okay, now it's Tuesday. Well, what do you do with the leftovers from Monday? Well, I guess we just get rid of them. So, that was a really easy fix to say, okay, but every day after should have some provision for if you make a soup out of the leftovers or you make a casserole out of the leftovers, but there's something good to be done with that food. And all it had to do was be put into their, menu nutritional system. So things like that, you can figure out those things at home too. Like, I have this problem and this is where I always end up wasting food. Okay, what are some solutions to address that? Like I said, we're doing more of those. We did one with Blue Hill Hospital. We did some tracking. We're working with Eastern Maine Medical Center now to look at the food waste tracking opportunities. And we actually did, not last January, but the one before, we did a challenge, an online challenge that we actually ran statewide that we encourage people to sign up. It was a bit aggressive. We asked them to track their waste daily for 4 weeks to see, what they were wasting. And each week of the challenge, we gave them some tips depending on what their problem was. And, and then we awarded prizes each week for the people who reduced the most food waste. And, it was a great effort. And the people who participated, there were really, I think on average, we saw 18% reduction in household food waste over it. But it was really, when you start looking at what you're wasting, you don't need us to tell you what to do. You can figure it out yourself. And so people were really happy. And we're looking at doing something like that again. These are some tips, that came out of that food waste tracking and measuring study. So, plan more. It's just some planning, never go to the grocery store without a shopping list. The other big thing is also take your list and shop your own pantry and refrigerator first. The amount of times that people forgot that they had carrots and then bought more carrots at the store, or, forgot they had lettuce or something, so fresh food particularly is a problem for this. So, in your refrigerator, and eat this first section for those things that aren't going to last. Those berries probably only have a few hours left, so definitely put them in the eat this first section. Store better. So, to learn about, there are, online, you can find a lot of good tips about how to, so if you notice that you are particularly wasting a certain thing, there's probably tips online that will tell you how to keep that good longer. Don't use the best by and use by date labels. And then, this cook creatively to waste less. This app, Super Cook, or their website, it's so terrific because you can put any items that you have, disparate things. Like I have a half a can of olives, I have some maple syrup, and some other thing that I want to, some lettuce. And you could put those 3 ingredients and it will give you a whole list of recipes with pictures to show you what you can make out of those odd ingredients. So it's, I'm not always the biggest fan of technology, but that is a great thing. So yes, yeah, well, I think, if you Google Super Cook, you'll find it. Or you can call me and I'll tell you. I'll look it up for you. So solution 2, like I told you, we did food rescue. So one of our students was at UNE, and she did with Biddeford, collecting the food from the dining hall and bringing it over to the local pantry. So students, particularly who work in the food service at their universities, come to us all the time because it's painful for them to see trays of food, being dumped. And so this really made them feel better, and they actually made a meaningful contribution to the local food pantry. We at the University of Maine, this is one of our students who started a community fridge. So this is in the Maine Student Union, and all the food that's in surplus from the cafeteria there gets packaged up by student volunteers and put into this refrigerator for free. So, and it's not an issue of like, oh, this is for hungry people. This is an issue of, hey, please take this food. We don't care, whatever reason you're hungry or whatever reason you want this food, just take it, because otherwise it would go to waste. So, so this was, we were very happy with this. Community suppers are also another great way to utilize surplus in a community. I think I saw when I drove in that you guys might have some kind of a community, but this community supper program that we started in Machias is not like a soup kitchen. It's not, again, it's not like, oh, are you hungry? Come and you can get some food. This is, here's surplus that's in the community. It's not going to be in the pantry because it's probably fresh food that won't stay that long. So we're going to make it into a meal, and we want the whole community to come out and participate by helping to cook the meal, participate by contributing surplus you might have at home. But it becomes a very fun, it's really a great community building, food system sort of building effort. So all these things really are super positive, not just in reducing food waste. As I talked about, the education piece is really important. And this is our favorite part of the food waste education, is the work that we're doing in elementary schools here in the state. We have found that that is such a great place to begin teaching kids about, because it doesn't take more than 10 minutes, honestly, to teach them that food does not belong in the trash can. They kind of get it pretty fast. They like food. Food makes them feel better when they eat it. Why would you ever throw it away? So we have them in the cafeteria. We have sorting stations so that if there are food scraps, they get collected so they can be composted, often used in the school garden program. So they learn about this food system, the circular food system. And there are a lot of components to this. I won't go through all of it, but I will tell you that it's a nationally recognized program now. So World Wildlife Fund, who has a food waste warrior program, has funded us to do, they saw what we did in the first year, and they have funded us to do another year of the program. And we were just invited to share our study to a national audience, because it really has made a difference. We have share baskets. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but it really replicates this community system. We're teaching kids, if you took too much and you're not going to eat it, put it in the share basket because somebody else might want it. Food doesn't belong in the trash. Food should be composted and used to grow more food. So it's really teaching that generation. And then they go home, and the reason why we do elementary school is because that age group is so powerful in their families, right? Middle schoolers, high schoolers, maybe people are tired of listening to them at home. They got too many ideas. But when your 6-year-old comes and tells you about something they learned at school that they're excited about, families are much more likely to listen. So anyway, so we're very excited about that work. We have a social media program. We have a website, as I said, Food Rescue MAINE. We even have TikTok videos online, some cooking tips, some food storage tips. So just a range of things that we think are common problems that people have. Solution 4, like I said, we work with farmers on trying to upcycle surplus food into either making it into new food products or going from farms to institutions. So a lot of times if you have surplus, a farmer didn't realize they were going to grow quite that many zucchini, probably like your home gardens too. And so, what can we do with it? But we have a lot of institutional buyers, either schools or, like I said, the Department of Corrections. So we try to pair those up. And so that was a program that we did. We're also doing GIS mapping of the food system so that ultimately by any zip code, you can actually go onto this map and see where are all the elements that are important. Where are the producers in my region? Like where are the farms producing the food? Where can I go and buy food? Where can I go and donate food? Where are the pantries near me? And then where are the composting facilities? So that we're, as a kind of an aid, a tool to people to be doing their part to sort of growing this circular food system. increasing food donation. We just do a lot of materials to try to educate businesses about it's safe, it's okay, you should donate, and and not waste it. And then this community food recycling, our biggest success in this waste diversion has been the city of Portland. We started and really learned a lot of things there. First of all, those drop-off sites were all located at community garden locations. So what that did was help with the contamination, because people, when they were dropping off their food scraps at those drop-off sites, they could see that this was at a gardening location. They got the idea that the compost would be used for food. So we didn't see things like pet waste bags or baby diapers or some of the things that they were afraid might show up, even plastic bags. We see people understanding that food only goes in these collection bins, because then it gets composted to be used to grow more food. So that was successful, and they did such a good job with it that it's grown now from, I think, 6 original sites in the city of Portland. I think they now are up to 12. So they're continuing, and they also have a curbside. They have Garbage to Garden, who does their curbside. You can pay whatever it is, $19 a month or something. But a lot of people use the community sites, because if Garbage to Garden picks up your stuff on Tuesday, then you have to wait till next Tuesday. But if you had, a lobster dinner on Friday night, you might not really want to wait around with those lobster shells and things. So you have a place to drop it off. So the community in Portland has really appreciated. The sustainability director for the city, who's been there, I think, over 20 years, he said of all the initiatives he's ever done, that this food waste, these community collection sites have been the most enthusiastically received program. So we help them, and we have that signage. We have a lot of materials available for communities who want to do this work. So, anyway, if you're interested, we have like brochures, about why it's a good idea. Those signboards we created, and we use them. We did a program with Waterville. We did one with Winslow, and Portland, and one other community, Reedfield also. So we've had some experience. Reedfield was interesting because they wanted to not only collect the food scraps at their transfer station, but they wanted to do the composting there at the transfer station, so that people could then come, after whatever time it was turned into compost, and then be able to pick up compost at the transfer station. So, and it is ultimately, according to the analysis that we've done, the most cost effective for a community to work that, but it's not that easy. And so it's, you have to, because you're now in the business of making compost and actually selling it. So it's not for everybody, but we, in the work that we do, research work, we like to try these different models to see what are the issues, so that we have answers for people who want to try. So anyway, I think, what time is it? About right. So in terms of next steps, what can you do? I mean, I think that's sort of also the idea here, is to learn more and to share this education about food waste, so that others can, understand. And we have the website, we have our blog, we have all those materials online that you can take a look at. It's really interesting. I think we also have a link to this Maine food waste generation study. I mean, if you're a numbers person, it might be interesting to see, how much it's by county. And we have it broken down by county. We have it broken down by 15 sectors. So if you're interested, how much are the restaurants doing? How much waste are the hospitals generating? Agriculture also, I mean, this was a little bit of a misunderstanding, because agriculture does have a component of food loss, but no farmers ever putting their food in the landfill. So it's not a real climate issue, but it's an issue of hunger, because they're, in many cases, they have a surplus of broccoli, let's just say, and they might just end up plowing it under, which, isn't terrible, goes into the soil. But when we have people that are hungry who could use that food, so one of the things we're working on is trying to figure out incentives for farmers, or how can we help them, because of course it costs something to pick all that surplus. But so when you look at the study, there's food loss associated with agriculture, but it's not really our biggest concern, because that is not the stuff that's ending up in the waste stream. It's just that we need to have that number so that we know it's an opportunity to probably feed more people. So there's a lot to learn. as I said, one of the simplest things that EPA recommends, that we recommend it because we know it works, just for a week, just for 2 days, start any food that might have gone into the trash, just put it separately. Now it's the right time. It's kind of cold outside, so you could have your bucket right out the door, really for the express purpose of getting familiar with what you're wasting so that you can then take some action to not waste it. And the freezer, we say the freezer is your friend. So a lot of that potential stuff that could be wasted, is it something that could have been put in the freezer before it got to be, rotten? And, you would be surprised at how many things you can actually stick in the freezer that will be perfectly good and edible. I mean, I do it all the time with berries because they do turn so fast, but frozen raspberries are really just as delicious as they are fresh. So, so track and measure to understand your own household food waste patterns, and then, really do what you can to build food waste action in your home by getting everyone to participate in the home. It doesn't really do so good if some family members are still dumping stuff. So try to start at home first, then with your community, and then, anytime that you want some extra work on this, you feel free to contact us and we can find something for you to do in terms of the program. So that's really, I think, all that I have to share with you. I mean, in terms of the slides. So.
Okay. Do we have some questions?
I have a question for our presenter.
Hold on.
This is a test question.
Uh-oh.
What is the food that has almost zero waste? It's a hydraulic sandwich.
Hydraulics.
Beer. And I'd like to make a couple of comments.
Sure.
Belfast is very blessed by having I believe it's 3 food pantries and the Belfast Soup Kitchen, which operates, 365 days a year, 5 days a week.
Wow.
And the statistics are outstanding. We essentially recycle. The Belfast Soup Kitchen works on recycled food. 107,000 pounds are provided by Good Shepherd last year. 206,000 pounds were donated, and that includes donations from Hannaford's and from local farmers. So we're actually supporting local farmers. They served 109,426 meals to 2,774 individuals. So that is an example of an outstanding success that's probably not well understood.
Oh, no, I mean, I think
every
that's,
place.
yeah, that's solution 2. That is basically solution 2. Like we talked about community fridges, community suppers, because that is, and in terms of the hierarchy, right? It was number 2. Like the first thing is to reduce, if you could not have so much surplus, but if you do, the very best thing you can do with it, which is what you guys are doing, which is feeding people. So it's, it's.
And I work hard to convince my wife that it's really good in spite of what the date says.
Oh, yeah. Yes. No, thank you for that.
Are you familiar with Waldo County Bounty, which is a Waldo County only organization? They've been doing a lot over the last 5 years that they've been in existence to recruit local farms. They do a lot of gleaning. Farms donate food to them, and then they pass it out to 24 different give and take tables, they call them, around the county, where people can just walk up and take fresh fruits and vegetables that are left there. So.
And local gardeners can just, like, when we have a ton of cucumbers. just take
Yeah,
it
right,
and sell
exactly.
Zucchini and all that
Oh.
stuff, you can take it and people that need it.
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, it's, I was actually in New Hampshire with some friends over the weekend, and it was a similar community thing. And it just strikes me that there are certain communities that understand about working together. And so this food waste issue is less, is already being addressed just because it's kind of common sense in those communities that if we have too much here and there's a need over here, then we should work. But that's not, unfortunately, every community is not as connected and cohesive in that way. But, it is terrific because, and therefore you can become a model for others. So that's why we like to work with you and maybe get the data. We are doing a study right now where, communities that are doing work on food waste, we're gathering the data so that we can show to other communities, see, it really is worth it for you to do this because this is the benefit. So, so thank you for the work you're already doing here. You're really a model in terms of that kind of thing.
WaldoCountyBounty.org. You can
Okay.
check it
Yeah,
out.
no, I will remember. That's, because it's terrific. And actually, even in my community, I definitely had too much this year of certain crops, and I took it to the pantry, but I wasn't sure if it would rotate fast enough through the pantry because they're not open all the time. So something where they're setting up tables more frequently is probably better for the fresh food.
Thank you for the presentation, Suzanne. I have a question about how you decide, or Food Rescue Maine decides which schools or other organizations you're going to work with, like hospitals or municipalities. How do you decide?
Well, I think a lot of it is when people, communities come to us and ask for help. On the school program, it's a particularly good question because we do have certain criteria that it's the school nutrition, it's the district nutrition director is our key person. And I think actually it might have been here in this community where there was some outreach from the school, but it came from teachers, which is also important, but we need to have the district nutrition director really want to do it because it's a lot of work from them. So it's not like you can volunteer them for the work. They have to be saying, hey, I want to do this because, and when you have that district nutrition director, also the work that we put in the one elementary school, we can be pretty sure then that that is going to be expanded across the district because it's the nutrition director who was already interested. And as soon as we train them with one school, and that's happened with every school that we've worked with. It's now a district-wide program.
This is a really excellent program. Thank you so much. I had a question. I think I remember seeing 37% in Maine food waste that goes into landfills. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the numbers, it's not an exact thing, but so we say between 30 and 40%, in any given, measurement period, but it's nothing that's like dropping dramatically, and it's not going, it's somewhere within that range of 30 to 40%.
So then my question is, have you gone the step of identifying what portion of that, or have you already decided what that portion is that's just simply food scraps that wouldn't be going to some other source except maybe composting?
Yeah, it's a good question. I call that a waste characterization study. So the first study in April was a waste generation study. The primary purpose was to understand who was generating wasted food and food loss, which of those 15 sectors and how much they were generating. We also did a little bit of work. That's why we know the majority across the board was good and edible. But there is a follow-on study that's taking place right now to take the data from the first study and really get in there and say, this much was just purely scraps that would be perfect for compost. This much was good and edible for people, this much was good and edible for, livestock, and this much, could really, be reduced easily with some better practices. So that is a study, and I'm not exactly sure, but I would say probably within the next 6 months that study will be released as well. Sure. I think
Thanks.
you need the lady with the microphone.
Hi.
Oh, the question about which is my favorite recipe site. It's called Supercook. Supercook is, and I think it's probably .com, but if you look, yeah. And I looked at a lot, there's a bunch of them. I mean, you can, but this one, I was amazed because it has savory and sweet, and they have the photographs, like all the things that I think when you're looking for a recipe makes you happy.
Hi, thank you. This is very interesting. We have some new apartments in town, some elder apartments and some new younger people are coming with families.
Mhm.
is there a good way to start educating people? I mean, families are busy. They don't, and they don't want to deal with this as a mess. What am I going to do with this? So are there good brochures or easy? I know that having children go home and tell their parents, that's great. But I think we have elders in a couple of the complexes, and then there's going to be new families coming in, maybe 23. And what's the best, good way to get there? And
Well, it's a
help
good
people?
question. It's a good question about how to do education, and just to kind of give you a sense, which I think is kind of surprising. If you thought about like which are the biggest food wasters, I think they call them high food wasters in this research study that was just released. It's actually the 18 to 24-year-olds. You would think that they're very, climate and environmentally minded. Yes, but they're actually big food wasters because they're very busy. It's hard for them to manage their food. And so a lot gets, they're very impulsive. So like I shop, but then I go out. And so anyway, a lot of food waste. And probably the second biggest, highest food wasting is households with young children. Because also very busy, lots of stuff going on, and smaller children that don't really yet understand about, like can't just throw all this food away. So it is an important thing to educate them. And I would say that, we're trying to do our part in schools, but we do have some brochures and we do have materials that, could make available. I think that that's probably like to do these talks within those communities. I mean, ideally for those multifamily housing units, it'd be great if whoever's organizing that unit, could make some sort of a composting, a collecting site available with some kind of guideline signage with pictures. I mean, this is one thing that can't be overstated, in our school food waste work that we do. Some of our schools were already having sorting stations, but they were having problem with contamination, like the kids getting confused, like what is supposed to go in here and what's supposed to go in there. It sounds silly, but like just having these photographs of like what is, if there's a language issue or like a reading, I'm not reading yet issue, the pictures really help clarify it. We also, for this food for the lunch program, we have stations, like we number them. So whatever you could do to make it easy for people to sign, signs, picture signs up near the thing, if there's a general bulletin board for the community, to share some of the materials that, we can provide you with, or, I think Scrap Dogs probably has, also educational materials, and they're going to be your resource provider. So, but all of us would be happy to help with that.
Anyone else? Yes?
I just want to say, yes, please. I think that as we get going with the community composting and all the other good things that are already taking place, if you have print materials, educational materials, I think we'd welcome them, and they would be a nice supplement to what Scrap Dogs is. Their material is a lot about, the process or how to do it their way. But about the general idea of conservation or composting, that would be really welcome, any of those materials that you have.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I think because we had that community composting, I told you we had a few pilot communities, and we produced a lot of these postcards that have some information. They're kind of nice. And I think I still have, some cartons of those. So, yeah, so I think, that might be something that, I could share with you. But yeah, so I mean, whoever would be the contact person, I mean, Brenda, maybe I can show you what we have available.
Yay, Brenda. Oh, sorry.
Oh, so my question is, I hear what you're saying about in order to get the schools involved, you need the school nutritionist, which I guess would be the head of food service.
Yes, yeah.
But I'm meeting with some high school students and teachers tomorrow who one of the things they're interested in is redoing. They used to compost all their food from the cafeteria. They want to get that going again. My question is, do you have any people who work with you who might come down and just meet with the students? Because it makes it so much more legitimate if the kids are meeting with someone from the University of Maine just to talk. and, go over, I love all your data sheets and
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. So not a real formal thing, just something touching base.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's our goal. I mean, that's the point of Food Rescue Maine and the work that we do. I mean, we go out and do the work, but then we are hope to be a resource. So,
Okay.
but I wouldn't say necessarily that we would drive to meet with them, but through Zoom, we have done that with high schools, with a lot of groups actually, where there's maybe a green team educator or somebody who is already doing this work and would like to see what research we're recommending. So yeah, and we have actually materials and programs for high schoolers because actually one of our classes, the students wanted to do something at the university to help high school students. So I think we have a packet of materials specifically for high school. I think they focused on that one, advocacy, so that high schoolers could go and actually talk to people about, trying to get the funding for whatever work they wanted. But, we definitely can help them with lots of ideas. I mean, they can replicate some of the work that we're doing with sorting stations and taking data sheets and measuring, the reduction in food waste. I mean, we've had kids, at the younger levels where they simply, collect up, they had a cooler there, not a share basket, but a cooler that anybody who wasn't going to eat something that was packaged and safe to reuse would leave the food there, and then they would make it available later for students who either stayed after school or as sports. So we've actually had a high school teacher who had a refrigerator in his right outside of his office for that purpose. Like if you're after school here and you're hungry, and they would collect up all that surplus from lunch and use it there. So there's a lot of good things that you could do. You don't have to be us. I mean, we have a lot of good ideas that we've seen other schools implement. Happy to share.
Great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, thank you very much. This is great. You cracked my head open with the open bye-bye labels and stuff. I had never heard that. And all I can imagine is how much more profit they get, the companies who do that, because we're throwing away food.
Yeah.
But is there any legislator who has taken that on
Well, that's
to
why
make that a change?
Yeah, well, we just happen to be fortunate that our Congresswoman, Shelley Pingree, is leading a bipartisan. So I can't remember all the other legislators who've come together with her, but it's Republicans and Democrats are on this group that are advocating, that have been actually, for date labeling changes they were not necessarily advocating to get rid of them all. They were saying, instead of having all this confusion, just where there really needed to be date labeling, and to make it clear, not this, best buy, like what is best buy, like whose standard of best is that? Like I said, like one day the potato chip is like a little less crunchy than the day before, like who decides? And certainly there's nothing wrong with eating it after. So their work, that for Congresswoman Pingree, that national legislation was really just meant to make it a lot clearer and really utilize labeling where it was needed. But out in California, I was saying, I just saw Congresswoman Pingree at an event, and we were talking about this, that the governor out in California just signed legislation to eliminate the labeling on packaging in the state of California. Now, because California is such a big economy, it's going to be a question, how's that going to happen, that manufacturers are going to do things just for California? So, and Shelley was saying, yeah, this is going to be good for us because it's probably not going to want to be just done for California. So this will be another catalyst for us to take it on federally and have this be the case everywhere. So, so that's kind of just of the moment. I think the governor just in California just signed it within the last month. So we have yet to see. Yes.
Hey, Bob. Rob.
Thanks, Roy. Yeah, we had a really nice presentation here, a few weeks ago, by a person who was concerned with the development of an alternative source of food provision for communities, namely the co-op stores. And they really their sensibilities are somewhat different from other corporate, and they are becoming corporate, providers of food. And I guess my question is there anything to learn from, by tapping those sensibilities in that different alternative way of providing food that would be any different in terms of how long stuff stays on the shelf, what type of stuff is bought, what type of stuff is provided? I'm just wondering, because it's grown enormously, to look at what this fella had to say. It was a tiny little niche provider of food, 30 and 40 years ago, but now there are all these systems developed to provide food to the co-op stores. And it's a big corporate thing right now. So I guess my question is, is there something to tap there in terms of helping your overall efforts, just because they are different and they may have some sensibilities that could be instructive?
Well, I think the one thing that co-op stores do that, is nice is the bulk, so that you can get just what you want. You don't have to buy, in these bigger quantities that are somehow decided, like 5 pounds of flour or whatever is the amount of flour you should have, and especially, I mean, one whole thing we didn't even get into is that as vacation land, we have a particular problem here in the state that we go from like 1.3 million residents to like 15 million extra people who come through the state in any given year and have vacation, get a place for a week or a few days and buy lots of stuff that they can't really use up in the amount of time that they're here. Now they're leaving. They don't really know where they can drop it off, so they just throw it all in the trash. So, we have that extra component. So some of those bulk things where you can get just what you need are really a help. We've talked, when I was at Hannaford, I think we did look like there's a Go-Go Refill, I think is also not a co-op, but another retailer that lets you, bring in the mason jars and you can have just as much, dishwashing liquid as you need, all these things. So that is really helpful for this idea of not getting too much, but it's not easy to execute, as a chain retailer. I mean, everything that they want to do has to be big and has to really, so it is a lot easier for the co-op stores to do that. So I guess all I could say is, if you choose to shop there, you are making the other retailers realize maybe this is something we should offer, because we seem to be losing out customers, which is kind of why Hannaford was looking at it, because Go-Go Refill came into the Scarborough, they were in the area, and they were, there was a lot of talk about people preferring to go buy these limited quantities of things. And so that's really probably how you can best impact it. I think, we are lucky to have Hannaford here in that they don't throw any food into the landfill. Ultimately, now they may compost or anaerobically digest more than we would like. Maybe more of it could be moved up the chain to feed more people, but they already do donate quite a bit of food into the charitable food system. So we are lucky that we don't have, and I think that, all of our retailers do a lot in terms of food donation. So, I mean, I think we're doing okay here by that. But yeah, there are things that the co-ops are doing that are much better, and they are a great source of education, I think. That's something that maybe not a regular grocery store doesn't feel that that's their job to do, but the co-ops do. So, but I think by you shopping there, it makes all the other retailers pay more attention.
But Hannaford did have in our town a huge bulk section for years and got rid of it. Hannaford used to sell a big bulk of spring lettuce, all different kind. You just went and filled up your bag. They used to sell mushrooms that weren't in plastic containers, and they have stopped all of that through the last 5 years, and everything is in plastic. They don't sell anything in bulk. So these are things that they could return to if they wanted to. And I mean, they have sustainability people working. I have written many letters to them about why can't I get mushrooms without a big plastic thing? But yeah, it's just very odd that they chose to go different from the co-op.
The fine line is food safety. That's the problem, that the food safety requirements force a lot of things that Well, for instance, you know, having people grab mushrooms, you know, that could be a disease vector. So that, you know, these are interesting problems.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Somebody mentioned COVID, and I think yeah, COVID really, and then like so much with COVID, even the prices, right? Like nothing really came back to how it was pre-COVID. Like a lot of things stuck. So I think that this excess packaging, because of the concern about people touching things, you know, okay, they haven't really, and we see the same in the schools that, you know, they had, when we started talking about share baskets as part of our study, that half the schools thought it was illegal to have a share basket because, oh, from COVID, oh, you can't have anything that would be touched by like, even though it's fully packaged, even a packaged food item shouldn't be touched by somebody else for some reason. But we assured them that it's really fine and that there's no illegal things about it. So some of it is misunderstanding, and COVID really made people very hyper vigilant. And the health department is actually really good at working with us, trying to not artificially waste food because of this like over vigilance about touching. And so I think that retailers could return to that. I think, you know, probably it's very nice. Like you were only going to buy maybe a few mushrooms, but now you are going to buy a half a pound, you know, 8 ounces of the mushrooms. No. I'm saying it's not. I'm saying it's a misunderstanding about food safety. And during COVID, people were really, and they kept saying like, it's not a touching thing. It's like really a airborne thing. But people still did not want people touching their food. So they did it during COVID. And I'm just saying, it's like a lot of things, it didn't get untangled afterwards where people are like, okay, now we can go back to not doing it. All those lines have been set up to produce the food that way. And maybe a byproduct is, instead of just buying a few mushrooms like you would want to, now you buy the box full of mushrooms. And yes, that's right. That's right. So yes, so that's why those are some practices that were good. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I hearken back to the idea of washing your hands for whatever song you were singing, you know, because that really put the onus on touching. And so that is something left over from that. Also, this Hannaford's, all of their organic produce that is of any size is shrink wrapped. And I can't imagine how that transfers into them being able to do anything with it, especially compost it. I mean, I was in a few weeks ago, I do shop the co-op mostly, but I have some things I get there, and I needed a particular cup. I would not buy, you know, anything that they had in there because it was all literally piece by piece. The pepper, you know, the cucumber and whatever. So if you're in communication there with them,
Yeah.
this was the organic section, and it also flew in the face of the word organic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would imagine. I mean, I do talk to them quite a bit because I work with the sustainability person there. I would imagine that it has to do with the other consumers, you know, like so much in this world today, what you feel is so clearly this way, other people feel is very clearly the other way. Like, I don't want somebody touching, like, especially I buy my organic food to be special, and I don't want to think that anybody's putting their germs on my organic food. I think is, you know, probably the reason why they've done that, because it is an extra cost. I mean, it's an extra cost to wrap that thing up in some plastic wrap than to just have it loose. So, and I can't imagine it's a preservation thing that somehow it keeps better. But I mean, that's the only other thing that I could think of as a reason why they keep it, is that, you know, maybe if it's a fragile vegetable, that if it gets tousled around, then maybe it won't survive as well. And so they wrap it up, because now instead of staying for 2 days, they can have it stay on the shelf for 4 days or something. So, I mean, I can find out, you know, certainly. I don't know. I haven't asked that specific question.
One more question.
Following on the same thing, I think you've sort of alluded to it, but it also has to do with who their suppliers are. I mean, sure, they're setting the tone in terms of their ordering, but a lot of food, particularly on this last point of to prevent post-harvest loss, it's field packed. And so, if you go to Walmart to buy lettuce, that's been packaged in the field.
Oh, yeah.
Not in the back room of Walmart.
Oh, yeah, for
And
sure.
Same
for
with
sure.
Hannaford, any of these things. So
Yes.
it comes that way because that's what the suppliers, they're already packaging it before it's even bought. So.
Yes, yes, the packaging occurs at that point, but having worked in the grocery store, I mean, depending on what it is, the buyer, the store has the power. So if they say,
Exactly.
look, we want it to become
To
like,
bulk stuff.
yeah, I mean,
Sure.
unless the supplier is bigger than they are, so
Yeah.
it kind of is that balance of power.
Right.
Like they supply for the whole country and like we don't care what Hannaford wants. But if Hannaford's a pretty big buyer and they say we don't want that plastic on it, then they'll give it to them without the plastic. I just don't, honestly, I don't know the issue with the plastic wrap, but those are the two things.
Yeah.
Either it's to keep it safer or it's because consumers have said, I'm not going to buy it if you just put it out there because somebody else might have touched it. So,
And can I just quickly ask you to clarify something you were talking about
sure.
in the landfill? There's a lot of PFAS in the leachate that gets into the water system. And is that from the plastic wrapped rubbish that's in there or the fact that it's so wet, as you were saying, and therefore it picks up the plastics from around as it's
Yes,
dripping
it's
down?
that.
Okay.
So the issue with the PFAS being carried out and the issue for composting, we should just talk about that even, is that only food should go, it should be a clean stream, is all waste should be clean streams, right? You want to recycle glass, you should only put the glass in there. You shouldn't put glass and labels and, inside stuff from the jar. It should be glass. Same thing with food. You want to use it for it should be food. This idea that just a couple years ago, I used to have problems when I would come out and present with some composters because they'd say, oh, just put those food papers in. It's fine. It's not fine because we don't know the pizza box and all that, especially a lot of food paper has been coated to not pick up the grease, which that coating is the PFAS. So forever we have said, not because I'm so smart, but because I work with the scientists and they said, you should tell them no, like it should not be paper of any kind because it's too confusing. Maybe some of the paper is okay and has nothing in it, but some of the paper is bad. So like nothing else but food should really be going into the compost. And so in the landfill, again, you have this wet food, liquidy stuff. It's not the food that's bad. It's what it's sitting next to that might have the chemicals. So all sorts of probably contaminants are coming out with that leachate. So that is the problem. Yeah, it's yucky.
We need to thank Suzanne so much for coming tonight.
No, I appreciate. Thank you for your interest and
Just
thank you
great.
for
Thank you.
staying and coming out. And if please, I'm happy to take any questions. I will look into the Hannaford thing because I talk to George all the time. So I'll ask him about the extra plastic wrap and why they continue to, like if there's any ideas that they could pick up from the co-op in terms of how they offer their food. So yeah, but let me know if there's anything I could do to help your community.
Why is lettuce always sold in stiff plastic tubs now instead of